All right, welcome to our Cindy Bishop Worldwide webinar today. We're going to be covering a very important topic for all real estate agents, you guys. What we're going to be talking about is radon mitigation. My name's Dave Redebaugh. I'm an instructor with Cindy Bishop Worldwide and the host of this webinar today. It's my pleasure, though, to be able to have Barry Robinson with us because he's really knowledgeable and he's a trusted leader in the subject of all things that are relevant to real estate sensitive environmental issues such as mold, lead, paint, and radon especially, okay? So he's got certifications in all of those different areas and is actually considered an industrial hygienist and therefore able to inspect a home for many different kinds of health issues. So he's absolutely the expert to have on this particular topic, folks. So before I turn this over to you, Barry, keep in mind, everybody that's on this, geniuses take notes. So make sure you don't miss the points that are going to be important to your business. The other thing is friends share. Many of you are going to be joining this webinar by video, and we ask that if there's benefit to you, share it with your friends, okay? So with that, please welcome Barry Robinson to our broadcast. Take it away, Barry.
Thanks, David. And today we're going to be talking about radon awareness and mitigation. And one of the problems that I encounter talking with clients and real estate agents is, you know, it's any problem that can't be seen, tasted, smelled, or doesn't have immediate impact on them. You know, in the human mind, a lot of times, if that's the case, it just doesn't exist. And in this case, that is definitely not accurate. What is radon? Where is it found? Why is it concerned? What health effects it may have? How you test for it, how you fix it, and how, if anything, should it affect realtors in a real estate transaction. That's going to be our topics today. So let's get started. Radon is, as you can see by the scientific table here, is one of the periodic table of elements. It's a radioactive material. It was discovered by a German chemist back in the turn of the century, 1800s to 1900. And basically this radiant emanation allows radon gas to create a radon decay chain. And it's more prevalent in areas based on the type of rock there are, usually granite, shale, phosphate deposits, and some beach sands. But it's found pretty much throughout the U.S. And all through parts of the world. So there's no area that you can live in the United States and really say, well, I don't have to worry about radon. The outdoor concentrations are typically about 0.4 picocuries per liter. And this is a measurement to determine what the level of radon is and at what point it becomes hazardous, and you may want to recommend mitigation. And not only can you find it in the air that you breathe, and this is a newer topic now, because typically people don't think about radon in water, but some of the modern devices actually affect the radon in the water. If you're in a well system, that radon can get in the water. Your newer homes will have an aerator on the faucet, and what that aerator does is basically release that radon gas into the air. Which is actually a good thing or better than you drinking it. So the EPA is now developing threshold levels for radon in water, and we have actively tested for radon in water, and that can be a problem if you're on a well. The radon as far as Virginia, you can see by this map, typically the areas around the mountains are going to be the highest potential. But there's no county in Virginia that's free of possible elevated levels of radon. What happens in the home, and you really have to understand the pressure differentials in a home to understand how radon enters. And this is one of the reasons that, you know, we've got more problems in newer structures. Since the energy crisis back in the late 70s, we've tightened up our homes. So any opening in the floor, crawl spaces, sump pump pits, bathroom rough ends, cracks, fireplaces, pipe protrusions, radon gas not only seeps through that, but because our homes are so tight, we run exhaust fans with our dryers, our kitchens, our HVAC units, it actually will pull gas up through the floor and into the structure. And of course, this results in elevated radon levels, particularly at the lower areas, but they can be elevated at all levels. So the picocurie is just simply a measure of radioactivity. And it relates to nuclear disintegrations per second. And the average indoor air picocuries in the U.S., the EPA estimates to be about 1.3. They also estimate the nationwide 1 in 15 homes will have a problem and exceed the level of 4 picocuries per liter. As you can see here, how the radon gas can be drawn into the house, and particularly in the winter when you're heating the house, as that hot air rises and goes out, you create what's called a stack effect. And it actually pulls more of that soil gas into the structure. It's actually not the radon gas that causes a problem. What happens is there are radon products of decay that as you breathe in, those products get stuck in your lungs and they can cause damage in the fine, sensitive lung tissue areas. And as you can see on this slide, while the national average is 1 in 15, here in Virginia, we're actually 1 in 4 with elevated. So we've got a lot more problem than they do nationally. This tells you that those health effects, and again, the RDPs or the radon decay products are pulled into your lungs. They're trapped in the bronchial areas, and they have alpha cancer-causing particles that actually can affect your lungs, particularly with chronic exposure. Back in 2005, the Surgeon General affirmed that radon was a problem and recommended that homes be checked and mitigated if they're over 4 picocuries per liter. And he estimated at that time that more than 20,000 Americans die each year of radon-related lung cancer. So, we know it's a problem. What do we do? The only way to know what your level is to test. And no level of radon is absolutely safe, but the action level is 4.0 picocuries per liter. And you can determine this by a couple of different choices of testing. There's a continuous radon monitor that's a 48-hour, 1 unit short-term test. Or you can take 2 units, again, a short-term test, which is 48 hours, and average the 2 together. Or you can do a long-term test for 90 days. Now, typically in a real estate transaction, because people don't want to wait around to see what the radon levels are, it's the 2-day or 48-hour test that is typically performed. So, in looking at radon levels and when they're going to be higher, earlier we talked about the effect that the heat has and the stack effect drawing it up through the house. So you can see that typically radon levels are higher in the wintertime and usually found the highest at the lowest level of the home where they tend to cool. Some HVAC systems will draw fresh air from the lowest level of the home, and that will distribute radon levels up to the upper levels and typically be higher than it normally is. Spring and fall, once it's about 60, 65 degrees, you're going to get the best average of what your annual radon levels will be, but it's not always practical to test it at that time. If you have some questions about the levels when you're in a home, the best choice is a long-term test of about 90 days, and that usually is best done, I think, in the fall. The spring, sometimes heavy rains like we've had this year in Virginia can saturate the soil and cause more of the radon gas to be pulled into the house versus normally exiting through the soil. So testing guidelines, the unit should be in tamper-resistant containers. All efforts should be made to make sure that they're not tampered with so you get an accurate test. You need to test it, in open areas, not in closets or storerooms or bathrooms or crawl spaces. The lowest living space is the best area to test it. And usually the device should be between 3 and 6 feet off the ground. And this is the breathing zone. And you don't really want to test during extended storms. The barometric pressure in those storms will actually cause radon gas because the drop in pressure will be sucked out of the ground. And on the continuous monitoring test units, you can actually see that coincide with the storm period. This is the continuous monitoring unit on the top there, the Radon. And then the other short-term test, for years were done with charcoal detectors. And you can get those still at Home Depot or your box stores. And they're somewhat accurate. The products of decay, they're weighed and then put out for a period of time, usually 48 hours or more. Then they're weighed again, and the products of decay will be absorbed by the charcoal and change the weight. The only thing that makes these a little less accurate, if you're in a humid basement environment, the moisture actually will be absorbed into the charcoal and give you a higher reading typically. The E-perms are one of the more popular ones because there's 2 units. They are voltage charged electrics that are positively charged. The negative charge of the radon products of decay reduces the voltage level, and you measure that reduction in voltage level between the 2 units and average it versus the time it was there, and you come up with a reading. Radon in water, again, there's not a lot of that going on. We test for it. We don't get many requests each year. There are some home sample test kits if you're concerned about your well water. And mitigation, you know, a lot of people get very concerned when they find out they have radon, but it can easily be fixed. There are reliable levels. Basically what you do is go to the lowest level of the home and install either a submembrane or a pipe and seal the entry points, and then attach a fan to it, and it helps pull that radon gas out and get it outside the house. These are some pictures of the different methods. You have the active soil depressurization, which is basically what I just described on the bottom left. It's a pipe put through. The pipe goes up through the house. There's a fan either in the lower levels or upper levels or outside that creates negative pressure and pulls that gas from beneath that slab and up and vents it above the roof line. And on a crawl space line, mitigation, it's a little different because you don't have a slab there. So you have to install this membrane plastic barrier and pipes underneath it that they then feed a main pipe. And that submembrane suction system allows that radon gas in the crawl space to be pulled from all areas and vented out above the roof line again. So how does it affect realtors? You should recommend that they test in all cases. You know, we'll talk about some myths about radon in a minute here, but what you need to understand is the NAR encourages that you recommend a test. And a lot of times we want to, you know, save our clients some money, and there's some myths about what type of structures may or may not have radon. But I have found that homes are bought and sold rather rapidly these days. And if your client doesn't test and the next client or buyer or purchaser of that home does, and it's high, and you had previously recommended for them not to test, you know, you may want to not get in that situation because you may be having to answer some difficult questions. So there's no state or federal law that requires radon testing. It's entirely negotiable between the parties. The real estate sales contract will typically include some type of radon test or mitigation contingency clause, but it doesn't technically have the rule of law supporting it. Virginia law requires that the people that are testing and mitigating either be NRPP or NRSB certified, and you can find those people online. As far as realtors regarding testing, it is recommended those professional testers be certified by those, and don't let parties involved in the transaction conduct any testing themselves. Every realtor needs to know these facts. It's a serious health hazard. The EPA and the Surgeon General says every house should be tested. If the test results of 4 picocuries per liter or greater, then remediation is recommended. And no action level or no level of radon is considered safe, but at 4.0, remediation is recommended to take place as soon as possible. So we talked about those myths earlier. You know, some people say house construction can affect it, older homes, drafty homes, you know, crawl space homes, walkout basements, you know, all of them today, particularly the way we seal up even the older homes, are now prone to have higher levels of radon, and we're getting more homes that fail radon than we have in the past. As far as, well, you know, I've lived in my home all this time, why should I bother now? Well, you know, it's a progressive and chronic disease. So the longer that you're exposed to it, I guess very much like cigarette smoke, the greater risk you have. So anytime you reduce those radon levels, then you're improving the chances of not being adversely affected by it. The other thing, you know, you talk about, well, the neighbor didn't have it, so I shouldn't have to worry about it. I've had townhouse units in the same row of the building where one tested high and one tested low. So it has a lot of impact depending on what's going on in the soil underneath, how the home's constructed, how the inhabitants use the home. So, you know, it can affect anybody. And radon, as we saw in the state of Virginia, is definitely one of the high areas. So, but it can be found in every state. So if you want more information, here's the Virginia Department of Health number. And they actually regulate radon and radon testing. You also can get some free information from the EPA. Typically, the EPA, if you want any information on, you know, environmental hazards, just epa.gov/radon/mold/lead paint, whatever the case may be. The EPA will even let you download some publications, Home and Seller's Buyer Guides to Radon and Consumer's Guide to Radon Reduction. And then you have, you know, some additional numbers here about drinking water as well. I appreciate your time, and hopefully you've benefited from this educational process.